So there are lots of lakes. Eric, I'm sure you've seen lakes before.
A few.
There are many, many lakes around the world. And some of these lakes are quite impressive. And over in the frozen tundra of Russia/Siberia, I still say Russia. I was born in the 80s.
Yeah, to me, it'll always be Russia.
You have a lake by the name of Lake Baikal. And that's the Americanized version of the name. The Russian version is obviously different, but I don't speak Russian. So
not a good place to skinny dip, I would assume.
It is huge. And for big chunks of the year, it is completely frozen over.
Yeah.
Like so much so that the whole ice road truckers thing, you can drive trucks across this lake to get to different areas of the lake.
That's cold.
I don't remember how deep the ice is, but if you're driving trucks on it, it's pretty good ice.
Yeah, probably 3-4 foot deep.
It is one of the world's largest lakes, and it is the deepest lake in the world. But this, of course, when you have an ancient body of water that's so deep and so isolated, and there's bound to be stories about it. And so tonight we're going to talk about the legends and lore that surround Lake Baikal.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So, Lake Baikal is what is called a rift lake. And what a rift lake is, it's a lake formed when two tectonic plates kind of pull apart, is my understanding. And so, Lake Baikal is literally one of the deepest places, it is the deepest freshwater lake, maximum depth of 5,387 feet. And again, just caused by these two tectonic plates that are basically just coming apart.
Now, I'm envisioning these two plates, of course, they're grinding together, like what we get earthquakes and everything out of. I think that depth is to the top of that plate. So in theory, if it separates, it could be much deeper in between those plates even.
It is the 7th largest lake by surface area, and it is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It contains 5,670 cubic miles of water. That is an unimaginable amount of water. It is about 23% of the world's fresh surface water in this single lake. It contains more water than all the Great Lakes combined. It is also considered the world's oldest lake at 25 to 30 million years. And in this lake, there are thousands of species of animals and plants that can only be found in the waters of Lake Baikal and the surrounding area. So, again, this is this isolated place on our planet and just teeming with life.
That volume of water, I mean, you were spouting out a lot of specs. I dove a little bit deeper because I like to wrap my mind around it. But every individual on the entire planet, if you drained this lake, would have 5 million gallons of water each for every single human on the face of this planet that we call Earth. That's a lot of water.
Now, of course, me being me, what brought me to Lake Baikal is I was reading a book about some extraterrestrial monsters living in the depths of the lake that came up to attack some people living on the shore, because I read a lot of horror novels. As we talked about in one of our episodes about fear, horror novels and movies and things are sometimes good for people that suffer with anxiety. And I don't know if they work, but I read a lot of horror. So that's how I came to Lake Baikal. Now, I had already heard some stories about Lake Baikal. It's a very interesting place. Again, I believe you can literally just dip the water out of the lake and drink it. It's so clear and pure.
Clear. Yes.
And again, they've got all kinds of creatures that live there that are sort of unique to that area. They've got the Nerpa seal, which is a seal that is only found in the waters of Lake Baikal. You have gigantic sturgeon. I believe they continue to grow as long as they live, and some of these sturgeon are just monstrous in size. But again, there's so many stories and legends about Lake Baikal. And of course, you have even just the origins of the name. One of the most popular origin stories for the name comes from the Buryat people. According to the Buryat, Lake Baikal appeared in ancient times as the result of an earthquake. Their legends say the earth just opened up and fire erupted from the opening, burning everything in its way. All the people could do was run and just pray to the gods, but the gods were deaf to their cries. Hopeless and tired, the people continued to repeat only 2 words, Baikal, which translated from Russian means stop the fire.
Wow.
Now, eventually the fire did stop and disappeared as if it had never existed, and in the place of the earthquake, a deep hole appeared, and it quickly filled up with transparent, icy cold water. This body of water that unexpectedly formed would go on to be called Baikal. Again, I don't know if the formation of Lake Baikal would have been witnessed, or actually, based on the timeline, the formation of Lake Baikal could not have been witnessed by people.
Right.
But that absolutely sounds like probably what happened to form Lake Baikal.
Yeah.
If it's being formed by 2 tectonic plates pulling apart.
Now, one of the things I thought was interesting is there's something like 6 rivers that flow into Lake Baikal. There's only 1 exflow, 1 river that's allowing water out of it. So if you got 6 rivers going into it and 1 in comparison about equal size, where's the rest of the water going? And the belief is that it's all those underground caves and in between the tectonic plates. We don't know how deep that is. We don't know where those go. You had mentioned seals. There are some species that have adapted to this fresh water that were previously only found in salt water. So many of the natives and stuff, and scientists even to this day, believe that some of those, seals and different creatures may have came from the ocean at one time, at least, to open cavernous tunnels to pop up here. But it's interesting because it went from the fire to now one of the most coldest areas on Earth. There are certain areas there that fishermen know if something would happen and they would fall out of their boats, there would be no time. If someone was immediately right there with a life preserver and a rope to pull them in, they would freeze to death before they got them back on the ship. Yeah. It's that cold, and you would die that quickly. So to be birthed of fire to basically come full turn, I thought was very interesting.
Another origin for Lake Baikal from the region is that of the flaming dragon. He appeared at sunset, glittering with fiery scales, seated in a chariot of gold. And sinking to the ground, the dragon waved his fiery tail, and the earth split from the impact. He waved again, and the ice on the tops of the mountains melted and flowed down in powerful streams, filling the gap to the brim. Near the lake that appeared, everything was instantly covered with greenery. Birds fluttered over the clear water, and animals ran merrily. Having looked at the created miracle, the dragon entered the lake and sank to its bottom. But every 120 years he came to the surface, and people organized great festivities in his honor. But people forgot that the dragon would regularly return, and the fiery dragon became angry and flooded the entire earth from edge to edge with water. That's a familiar story.
I love that story.
Later, other tribes, other peoples appeared, but no one else had heard of the dragon. And some stories say that the water dragon still swims the waters of Lake Baikal. The natives of the region refer to it as Lusud Khan, or Usan Labsan Khan, which translates to Water Dragon Master. Some say it's like a huge sturgeon with an evil face, while others say it is a lizard-like monster with claws and armor plating along its back, and still others say it looks like an ancient ichthyosaur, an ancestor of the crocodile. Locals have offered the beast furs, jewelry, and food for several centuries, and some stories say that they may have even practiced blood sacrifices at one point as well. Now, early Chinese explorers told tales of strange beasts in the lake, which they referred to as gods of the lake and dragonfishes. These creatures are also represented in ancient petroglyphs found along the Baikal cliffs. There is a large stone slab erected as a monument on the bank of the Yenisei River, which is one of those rivers in the region. It's not actually on the lake. This is near the village of Askies, which is estimated to date to between 3rd and 9th century BC, which depicts some sort of mysterious creature with a forked tongue, long wicked claws, and armor plates along its back. It is shown standing upright, but apparently is completely submerged in water because it shows little fishes swimming all around it. As late as the 1980s, Soviet researchers recorded a 90-foot moving object in the lake with echolocators, but failed to determine exactly what this creature was.
Wow.
So, again, they still have those monstrously large sturgeon, which if you've ever seen a sturgeon, I mean, it looks like a dinosaur.
Yeah, they look
and
definitely
the
prehistoric.
armored plates and sort of crocodilian almost. So I can understand where some of those sightings could have been one of those.
It's unlike any other fish you ever see.
I saw a video not that long ago of someone who had caught one. Some river or lake here in America, but even that, I mean, those things continue to grow until they die, basically. This thing was huge. I mean, they get way bigger than like, a little bass boat. They're monstrous in size.
Now, you had mentioned paranormal, and that is definitely something that Lake Baikal is known for. Everything from, like, I'll call them will-o-wisps or dancing lights that are spotted year-round, just kind of hovering and fluttering, playing above the waters, to a blood-curdling screams that seem to resonate from the mists and the fogs. Many of the sailors and the fishermen out on their boats report. All the way to flying discs with these almost like giant spotlight beams going underneath the water as if it's trying to locate something. Strange glowing lights are often spotted at night by ships sailing through the frigid waters. And not only spotted, but these seem to like follow inquisitively, these ships and these boats for many, many miles. And then there is the red fog that I mentioned, and it can be quite unhealthy, even deadly. For those that encounter it. And it's believed to kind of be a natural phenomenon when like large forest fires and smog and pollution in the area seems to pool together down in the valley. And for whatever reason, it has a red cast to it. It smells a lot like sulfur, burnt or decaying eggs, kind of that, which adds a very nauseating smell, but very unsafe to breathe. So got dragons, giant sturgeons, 90-foot unknown creatures documented,
you
UFOs.
Got much more than that, yeah.
I mean, yeah, we're just scratching the surface of that ice.
Yeah, speaking of UFOs, aliens are said to be regular visitors at Lake Baikal. So much so that I believe they have an organization that routinely meets up at the lake just waiting for UFOs to arrive. In the summer of 2012, several locals organized a UFO observation mission on the shores of the lake, hoping to prove the existence of extraterrestrial activity in the region. There's a story of a Russian Tu-154 plane that crashed into the frigid waters of Lake Baikal after being pursued by a UFO. Local fishermen claim to have seen strange lights hovering over the lake, cruising underwater, or even erupting from the water to shoot into the sky. People have claimed to see UFOs descend rapidly from the sky to settle gently on the lake surface and float there like a leaf on the tension. I mean, it's just all kinds of things. One of my favorite stories, and this is sort of the story that drew me to Baikal, one of the original stories, and I've read this a couple times. This is a bizarre story that's said to have happened in 1982. Russian Navy divers on a routine diving exercise had dove into Lake Baikal and were at a depth of about 164 feet below the surface when they reportedly encountered strange humanoid creatures below the surface. They claim these humanoid-shaped creatures had bodies that were almost 9 feet from head to toe, and they were dressed in silvery suits. Some had clear spheres on their heads, I assume some sort of diving apparatus maybe, but notably, they did not have any kind of air tanks whatsoever visible on their bodies. Now, I think like anybody, the divers quickly surfaced to escape from said creatures.
What the heck?
And reported the encounter to their commander. Their commander immediately ordered them back into the water with orders to capture one of these strange swimmers.
Sounds like a real boss.
Well, sounds
Get
like
back down to the water. You're not done yet.
Again, this is like Soviet era Russia, right? So
yeah.
7 divers went back into the freezing waters of Lake Baikal with the attempts, I guess they were going to try to net one of these creatures. They were forcefully expelled from the lake by the swimmers. And I think that just means they were shot to the surface. Now, if you know anything about diving,
that could be very bad.
Shoot to the surface, you slowly proceed, otherwise you can suffer from the bends. There were not enough decompression chambers for all 7 divers. 4 of them got spots, 3 of them did not. I don't know how they decided who did and who didn't, but the 3 that did not died from the bends. The 4 that did get spots, I believe, suffered permanent physical injuries from what happened that day, and apparently vowed that they would never talk about this incident. So how do we know about it? Well, somebody talked about it somewhere. Now, the Russian government denies that the incident ever happened. Now, there's a local fisherman named Nikolai Kiriv, and he tells a story about a fishing trip he was on in the 1990s. Now, he was fishing on the lake at night, and him and his companions saw large human-shaped figures leaping out of the water like flying fish. I assume, shooting out of the water and kind of gliding along before diving back in, like you might imagine dolphins or something like that. They were terrified that these creatures might tip their boat over. As Eric was saying, the water is ridiculously cold. So after throwing a large net in the water trying to capture one, which luckily they didn't retaliate, they quickly returned to shore, never to fish in that part of the lake again. In 1977, a deepwater submersible called Pacis was involved in scientific research, operating at a depth of 3,600 feet within the lake. At one point, they turned off all their exterior lights and they sat in complete darkness just to kind of, feel what that was like. Suddenly, a bright beam shone upon the sub from an outside source. This light remained fixed on the submarine for several seconds before flickering out and leaving them once again in the dark. So there are numerous stories of things down in the depths. Apparently, at one point in time, they found strange tracks on the bottom of the lake that wouldn't have belonged to any animal that lived in the lake, and certainly they didn't have any sort of submersible vehicle that went along the bottom of the lake to leave these tracks.
Right. Well, and a lot of these humanoid creatures, at least by the artist depictions, almost seem to look a little similar to like mermen, mermaid. They have fins at least. Maybe they have legs, not one big tail, but gills and that type. And it's one of these stories I thought was really interesting from 1901. It goes back a ways. But it's a story called The Silver Pharaohs. Now, very, very similar to some of the stories that Bill's already shared, but these silver-scaled humanoid swimmers appeared again. They found in this article, very well documented, in 1901, and it was recorded first by one of the locals, and then as they dove into it, they actually found some, I would consider them almost like monks types that they had recorded these stories and also put it in private libraries. So again, multiple sources. But historian, philosophers, they recorded this diary, and it was something that was passed on by the natives of the time in 1901. And they were fishermen, just simple fishermen using nets, small like rowboats, maybe a sail on it, in the region. And on more than one occasion, these natives told of a story of these giant silver swimmers, humanoid-like fish men. Said they appeared wearing what was described as silver gowns and attire with jewelry, headpieces that resembled like Egyptian pharaoh designs. And these silver humanoids would often play one with another, surfacing around the fishermen and the boats, almost like inquisitive. But it was very clear that they weren't intimidated at all by the fishermen. It was more like, you're in our turf.
If you were 9 feet tall and can survive in the depths of Lake Baikal, what do you got to be afraid of a human being for? At those
temperatures, yeah, you got some little bobbing block of wood out here with some people
He's
on it.
afraid to get wet.
Well, they got to the point where it became so frequent, more and more of these giant swimmers would show up, and they would tug and pull on the nets. And they said it was like, almost like, hey, you're taking too much of our food, but no words were spoken, but said that was kind of the intent that they got across. These humanoids were described almost like giants. And while I could not find a size that was given in any of these, I kind of envision a 15-foot-ish person. So easily double, close to triple the size.
Well, but I think, again, when we talk about giants, that's a subjective thing.
Very much.
And so it could vary. I mean, those descriptions are very much in line of the things that the Navy saw and the fishermen. So, I mean, 9 foot tall is still...
That's a giant.
That's a giant.
That's a giant. Well, it is recorded that one of these silver pharaohs touched a human that was leaning over the boat as they were kind of wrestling with this fishing net. And he immediately died and began to wither, almost like the moisture was being pulled out, mummifying him.
Wow.
And then obviously he fell into the water. They wrapped him in his own net and then took him to the depths of the water. I mean, that's like right out of a horror movie. I don't care who you are. So obviously the men became very fearful. At that point, they, for the first time, had retaliated. They had killed one of their men, dragged them down to the depths. So these attacks got so bad, at one point the fishermen took up arms against them. and were able to injure, it said, several of the silver pharaohs, which did seem to kind of drive them back down into the watery depths in the domains. And they kind of reclaimed this fishing area, but said still to this day, many of the fishermen have certain areas. It's like it's not on a map, but that's their area. We don't fish there.
My understanding is there's a lot of places on Lake Baikal that are kind of like that for various reasons, not just, these silver pharaohs
or whatever.
But there's, I'll get into it as we go on. Another story that I found kind of interesting was there's legends that the gold reserves of the Russian Empire might have been dumped into the lake after the 1917 revolution. As it would have happened as the gold was being moved further and further into Siberia, and apparently things switched sides, back and forth for a while. In 1919, the Bolsheviks ended up with the gold, and 180 tons were, quote-unquote, lost.
180 tons.
Some believe the gold sank when a train transporting it crashed on the Baikal Railway along the lake.
Okay, so not intentional,
not
accidental.
Lost, yes.
Because I'm thinking, what makes you think you can get 5,000 feet down in the bottom of this icy lake to retrieve said treasure?
No.
Okay.
This was unintentional. Multiple expeditions of mere submersibles have been lowered to the bottom of the lake, and they have found the remains of century-old boxes that would have been time appropriate, and with gold glitter still on the wood. So, they were never able to be retrieved, though, due to the shifting ground at the bottom of the lake. Again, Lake Baikal is so very deep. My understanding is there could be as much as 1,000 feet difference between the actual bottom of the lake and what they call the silt bed of the lake. And when you walk in like a pond or a lake and you kick up all the muck at the bottom, now imagine that with a 5,000 foot deep lake.
Right.
All that sediment settles at the bottom like that. So, another thing about Lake Baikal is apparently it is yet another of one of these infamous triangles.
Ooh.
And there are various vessels and planes that have disappeared over these waters. One story I found this morning involved a Russian military plane that was, I guess, tried to fly over the lake for some reason and encountered such fierce wind resistance that they couldn't fly over. They had to turn around and go back. And they said every time you try to fly over the lake in a plane, you run into this kind of resistance.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned a story briefly about a UFO that chased a plane and the plane crashed in the waters as well. So
one of the first attempts to cross the lake by aircraft, I believe, was with a balloon. And they lost contact with them pretty quickly after they left.
I'm sorry, that does not seem safe.
Well, hot air balloon, and
all the cold temperatures.
But there are many places on the lake that are known for strange disappearances, such as one on the western shore known as Cape Righty. And this area has so many vanishings that the locals consider it to be cursed and sure to bring death to whoever goes there. Another area is around the island of Great Ushanka-E, near Cape Sun, as well as the huge island of Olkhon. Olkhon is known for a place called the Devil's Crater, from where one of the most recent and well-known disappearances comes from. On June 26, 2011, the pleasure boat Yamaha left from a village with an experienced crew of 4 to test out a new motor, and they never returned. The crew were all seasoned sailors, but contact was lost shortly after they left when a sudden thick fog rolled in.
Here we go with the fog.
Now, when the fog burned off, the boat was gone. Several searches turned up nothing, no wreckage, no clue whatsoever as to the Yamaha's fate. The locals say that sudden whirlpools appear in the region known as the Devil's Crater, and that they suck anything nearby down to hell.
I could totally see that with the tectonic plates possibly moving down below, creating air pockets, releasing
well, even
whirlpools.
They find like little mud volcanoes at the bottom of the lake routinely, and cracks and fissures that have formed because of the tectonic stresses. So, even now, that lake is still not seismically settled.
Yeah.
So things are still shifting
and moving. It's a very active area.
Yeah.
Well, in the mid to late 1980s, there was a Russian scientist by the name of Tikhon Niko. Now, he has a home in the area and has spotted what he calls a UFO encounter on 3 separate occasions, ranging from a large flying disc sailing above the waters, stopping from time to time to shine again, as I described, this bright, like, beam of light, spotlight, if you will, down onto the waters as if it's looking for something. From personally witnessing this strange event and seemingly out of this world encounter, the same Russian scientist would also report an even stranger event. And this was on a warmer summer evening. T1 Nico was there with 10 other witnesses, and noticed what they described as a black meteor streaming from the sky at great speeds. Now, it looked like it was just going to slam right into the waters of Lake Baikal. However, just meters before the surface of splashing down, it just suddenly stops, freezes in midair, and then it changes trajectories and flies quickly at a high speed east towards the fishing village, which is where most of the docks and the boats are for many of the fishermen. Now, again, we had 10 witnesses that were there besides the good scientist, not seemingly understanding what was going on, but now this was heading directly for their homes, for some of their livelihood, for their boats. And some of these, I mean, they weren't all in one location. So some of the 10 were actually at this dock and getting off of their boats. And to see this giant black meteor level with the water streaming directly across you at fast pace, needless to say, it caused a little bit of a stir and some panic. Again, though, as just feet before it would smack into the dock and the boats, it just abruptly stopped yet again, frozen in midair. As they watched with fear, they said it shivered and was putting off a humming noise. And then suddenly, right before impact, it vanished. One person said they thought they saw it move off to one side. Most of the majority of them said, no, it just more like stopped, hovered, vibrated, and then just vanished right in front of their eyes. Have another event, Lake Shara Nur, I believe is the way you pronounce it. It's another lake in the region, not geographically far from Lake Baikal. Also found
Baikal.
Baikal. Why do I keep saying Baikal? I even spelled it Baikal. Geographically far from Lake Baikal. Also found in the Siberian regions of what we're going to call Russia. Now, many divers visit it yearly for its teeming with many rare forms of fish and creatures. Now, one such quite unique only to this region is a giant eel snake. Now, this is exactly what it sounds like. A giant eel that has been documented here to be as large as 15 feet. And it's believed it also could exist, continuing to grow like the sturgeon that Bill talked about, to much larger sizes. Recently, some skeletal remains, I guess, have been found of this giant eel snake, and some they have found have been like 22 feet. So there is some proof, definitely, that 15, realistically, to maybe 22, 24 feet. But these things are dangerous. They are ruthless. It results in many deaths of divers and even many more injuries annually. They're very aggressive, and they will basically attack anything that comes within its domain. It has giant rows of sharp teeth. So imagine a 15-foot long eel as you're a diver swimming under the water, and it's hiding out like in some little stack of rocks or a cave. You're not even intending to mess with it, but you come close. This thing comes out with several rows of sharp teeth, much like a shark, I'm envisioning, and just starts gnawing at you. Not a pleasant circumstance.
Yeah, well, eels are pretty vicious.
Well,
as a matter of fact, I mean, you're familiar with the movie Alien.
Oh, yeah.
The alien's inner jaw is actually inspired by the biology of the moray eel, who actually has a little inner jaw that comes out just like that.
Oh, that's creepy.
Like, eels are pretty gnarly creatures.
Well, as if this wasn't scary and weird enough, Russian divers recently have discovered and charted several underwater caverns that connect Lake Shara Nur to, you guess it, Lake Baikal. So there's a direct link of underground passages. So again, these giant eels could very well exist also in the depths of Lake Baikal. And as we said, we're talking over 5,000 foot deep water. Goodness knows how big those things could be.
It's like a mile deep.
Yeah.
Like more than, well, I don't remember the exact footage of a mile, but that's
well over a mile.
Yeah.
Well over a mile.
That's crazy. Again, you talk about the sturgeon. Those are just monstrously big fish. And what was it, a 90-foot object, I think I said in that one story?
90 foot they spotted and they couldn't figure out what it was.
Yeah. I mean, neither the sturgeon nor the eel is supposed to be that big. But still, that's, there was something down there.
Well, and a lot of the sailors have reported large creatures following them in the depths of the water.
Routinely. They see shapes under the water.
Again, it's hard to comprehend, but this water is so clear, so pure, it's hard to tell depth. Like, it would look like it's maybe 20 foot, and you may be in 100 foot or 200 foot deep of water. Some of the fishermen and stuff have even reported the underwater lights, almost like a flying saucer or dish, following beneath their boats and stuff. How creepy would that be?
Call it a USO, unidentified submersible object.
Yeah. You imagine out there in this water, and these lights are just kind of illuminating up around you, and something's following you.
And again, there's not a routine submarine complement in the lake. I mean, it's not like they have submarines based there or anything.
Yeah, it's not.
They do.
It's not the best circumstances for it.
Yeah, they do occasionally have submarines for research purposes or whatever, but they're not there all the time. It's not like there's a military base or anything like that. So when you
possibly an alien base, though,
it could be.
That's
when you see these things under the surface of the water, there's no telling what they are. No. And yeah, you might occasionally see a surgeon. You might occasionally see a sturgeon swim underneath and not immediately recognize what it is, but you would assume people that live on the lake know what those are.
Fishermen would know what the fish are in the lake. So, well, 3 rules of Lake Baikal, according to the natives, and I thought this was very respectful and interesting, but the 3 rules, according to the natives, that you must always follow if you go to Lake Baikal. Number 1, you never throw anything into the lake. No trash, no litter, no toxic chemicals, obviously. And to their belief, this will anger the spirits of the sleeping giants.
Well, you get that dragon mad at you.
Yeah. Silver pharaohs, giants, dragons. Number 2, never spit into the water. I can imagine a lot of these fishermen out there probably doing just that. Maybe worse.
To be fair, though,
themselves or whatever.
You're thinking American fishermen.
True. So we are dirty, disgusting fishermen. So yeah. But again, this is considered disrespectful, as you can imagine. And again, it's said that it will anger the spirits, the great sleeping ones beneath the waters. And number 3, I thought was very interesting. The natives do not call this Lake Baikal. To them, it is called a sea.
It is
not
big.
A lake.
My understanding is it's one of those, you stand on one shore, you don't see the other shore.
Now, you've also, obviously, you got to respect that purity, the clarity of the lake, and to keep it that way. So, yeah, you don't want trash and chemicals and all that stuff in there. But many natives believe that you should not even camp on close to the banks because charred wood and just natural stuff would flow back into the waters, and it wouldn't be as crystal clear. Again, I can see, with Native Americans especially, they are very respectful of Mother Earth. I wish some of us could have learned that lesson. Because we're nasty. I mean, we throw our trash and bottles, and you go to Florida and stuff after spring break, and it takes them months to pick up all the glass beer bottles.
All you got to do is look at the water in Lake of the Ozarks, and you lose visibility at 2 inches or something like that. I mean,
yeah.
Well, I think it might be time for headlines. Mine is from the mirror.co.uk by Bradley Jolly, dated August 23rd, 2023. And you will see that it is at least partially related to Russia and water. So I really couldn't find any headlines about Lake Baikal other than apparently Lake Baikal is overdue for a major earthquake.
Oh, joy.
So I can only imagine what impact that might have on the region.
The sleeping dragon will rise.
But monster sea creature with human-like teeth found in deep sea, and everyone's terrified. A deep-sea fisherman has discovered a bizarre-looking fish with human-like teeth, and Instagram users are comparing it to a monster. Roman Fedorstov, a trawler in Murmansk, northwest Russia, has devoted his entire career to searching for unknown and undocumented creatures. He spends months of his life at sea sharing snaps of frightening fish with his 650,000 followers on Instagram. His latest catch is pretty baffling and a little terrifying. He presented a picture that shows a huge black and gray spotted fish with large fins and what appears to be multiple massive teeth, including molars, in its mouth.
Ooh.
Now, Roman identified it as a type of wolf eel, sharing the creepy video with his followers, where it garnered 198,000 views and 7,800 likes, as well as thousands of comments. In the clip, the eel can be seen lying flat before Roman opens up its mouth and shows off its crowded jaw, captioned, "You can never have too many teeth, especially the toothy teeth." One Instagram user commented, "Smile, darling, you're on candid camera. Magnificent creature." Another added, "Wolf eels like to eat hard-shelled animals like crabs and clams and are not exactly as ferocious as they look. They apparently also mate for life. They only seem to bite you if you bother them." So that obviously explains the need for teeth if you're going to be crushing shells.
Yeah.
A third wrote, "First glance, I thought it was a mutant seal. Bro, the stuff that you pull up from the deep is absolutely unbelievable." And another user added, "This fish tastes very good, even if it looks like a monster." And a final commenter said, "Looks like 4 rows of dog teeth." Now, wolf eels live in the cold waters of the North Pacific Ocean from California to the Sea of Japan, down at a depth of around 600 feet. They can grow to be over 8 feet long.
That's big. That's big.
And I don't know about you, but anytime you see pictures of fish with human-like teeth, they're kind of unnerving.
I've saw pictures of the wolf eel, and it is very unnerving. It looks almost alien-like with those rows of teeth, and it's creepy. Well, I also struggled to find a headline.
It's hard to find one for Lake Baikal.
But I did find, well, I'll just start off and say, how would you like to book an expedition to Lake Baikal?
I mean, it sounds interesting, but there's a lot of political tension over in that region right now.
That is very true. Well, that's what I came up with for my headline, taken from Discover Russia webpage. You can do just that. Booking is open for several options, ranging anywhere from 6 to 8 days, and on average costing somewhere around $2,000 a person, which doesn't seem too bad if you were able to get back out, safely and everything. One of the first exhibitions that they put up that they offer is Ice Age Lake Baikal. This can be a private group if you have enough people, obviously, that they don't let anybody else in, or it's a public event, so you can book however you want to. But the public event starts at $2,090 per person. It is for 6 days. It's considered a moderate grade as far as physical exertion and overall health. You have to be able to check a few boxes that, makes you healthy enough to be able to take these treks. And this takes place between January and April. It says, travel to Lake Baikal at the most beautiful time of the year when the legendary clear ice shines under your feet. Grottos are filled with crystal chandeliers of the purest water, and dawns at sunset are fulfilled in the shades of life. The world's largest ice skating rink features 53 types of ice, including Baikal's famous turquoise, absolutely see-through crystal ice, and will also cross Baikal on a hoverboat. Another one that they came up with is the Lake Baikal Siberian Summer. This is another option. It starts off at $2,950 a person. It's for 8 days. It has a moderate grade as far as health conditions and physical exertions. Takes place between June and October, and this is only a private event. So it is very limited to only about 3 to 4 people, they say, each time that they do this. Now, this tour combines classic Baikal adventure and a trip deeper into the area of the woods around, especially Lake Baikal, a very remote and isolated manor, accessible only by 4x4 or helicopter. Now, Russian bears inhabit this area in abundance, and you will surely be guaranteed a safe bear viewing in the wilderness.
Now, in Siberia, and see if I can get this name right, they have a legend about the Irkuyen, which is apparently a bear of unrivaled size. Polar bears are scared of this thing, apparently.
Oh, goodness.
So, I don't know. I want to go looking for bears in Siberia, because if you find one of those...
It does say safe. They guarantee safe.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure how you guarantee safe against that, but far be it from me to argue with the Russian advertising. But basically, for a few days, it says, we will stay in a real Siberian hunter's house. So I'm assuming that's why you're very limited to only 3 or 4 people is, it's a small hunting cabin. So we're just going to take you out here in the middle of the woods where giant bears are. And, you'll be safe here, but you can only get out with a 4x4 or a helicopter. So we control both of those. So good luck.
I don't want to be paranoid, but that seems like a situation rife for exploitation. Well, we got you in, comrade, but maybe we don't get you out.
$2,950 to get in, $2,950 more to get out.
Well, I read a book called The Terror by Dan Simmons, and it's about an expedition to the Arctic. And apparently, in places like that, it can get so cold that if you go outside and you draw breath in through your mouth, the temperature differential between the inside of your teeth and the outside of your teeth will cause your teeth to crack.
Ooh.
So I don't want to go someplace that cold.
It's cold enough around here whenever you step out and it hurts to breathe. You know, you get that sharp pain. Almost, you feel like your lungs are freezing.
Especially if you have to do any kind of exertion. It almost feels like you're cutting your throat.
Yeah, and that is nowhere near as cold as what's there. So no, thank you. I appreciate the kind $2,950 possible one-way ticket invitation, but yeah, not for me. So I think it's time for questions. So Bill, based upon my headliner here, well, first off, I got to say, kudos to you. I loved this topic. This was one that you brought up. He's always keeping me on my toes, and I did very much enjoy doing the research for this. But based on my headline, my question comes, if you won totally free of charge any choice of these trips to Lake Baikal, which would interest you most? And this is for an entire week now. Would it be number one, the Siberian region of Lake Baikal in a private chateau in the wilderness where we have safe bear and moose viewings? Or would it be number two, a guided fishing boat expedition out on the lake with the locals, where you could observe them maybe netting and fishing? Or would it be three, the icy camp literally on top of the frozen Lake Baikal, where you would sleep, hopefully comfortably, looking directly down thousands of feet below?
I think for the sake of my family, I would do the first one, just because my kid loves bears, and so he would probably really enjoy that trip.
Sounds like it would probably be the warmest, if there is such a thing in Siberia. At least you would have you would have some fireplace and good shelter.
The other reason would be, number one, I don't like heights, and when you're in a boat, that's just a modification of that particular fear, because you're still way, way above the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you could look down and see it, that would be unnerving, to say the least. I don't like being like in that elevated position. So like, I'm not a big fan of going out on the lake in a boat. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because I know there's a lot underneath me, and if something happens and goes wrong, I'm not, I'm going to drown. So
you'll freeze before you drown, probably.
Or yeah, in Lake Baikal, you're going to freeze to death.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I would go out on a limb a bit more. I think I would choose option 3, where I'm literally camped out on the ice. I would just have a little bit of faith and trust that, the 6, 8, 10, 12 foot of solid ice block below me. I think it would be beautiful to, have the flickering of the moon and the flames out there on this crystal ice. I think I would probably freeze to death regardless of getting in the water. I hate the cold anymore. And after spending a week out there, I would be lucky to even be able to move. But that would be the choice I wanted, because if I'm going to go that far, I want to experience life or death, as the case may be. And I guess the worst case scenario, if it would crack, I wouldn't have to worry about drowning, which is one of my biggest fears I've talked about. I would freeze to death just much quicker, and it would be over quickly.
Yeah, no, it's one and done on that one.
What about you?
Do you have any good scary lake stories?
I do. Lake of the Ozarks, actually.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm most familiar with, the one we're closest to. Many, many summers, my uncle, Uncle Billy, and my dad and I would go up and we would fish, not in fancy boats, but just John boats. We would kind of go to the back areas of the lake around Lynn Creek, Missouri. And we would do a lot of catfishing by night, and white bass fishing I love to do during the day. And at night, I don't care who you are. It's creepy when you're out in a boat, rocking, the water's sloshing. But that lake is not clear, not at all like Lake Baikal. It's quite unfortunately littered, and you don't know what you're dealing with. But we had a little fish finder. And that way we could tell where logs was and stuff, so we wouldn't get hung up on them as we would fish. And my uncle had shown us that there was this area where it honestly looked like a whole bunch of trees had been fallen and just laying there. And it was a great spot to fish.
Well, yeah.
Easy spot to get tangled up and lose some lures and stuff. But we were watching the fish finder. And again, this is not super scientific equipment. It's pretty blunt. But one of those trees, Bill, swam off.
Wow.
I mean, this thing, in comparison to the boat, was equal size to I'm going to say a 15-foot John boat. And I mean, seriously, it looked like one of the logs that we were fishing around. And my uncle just kind of jumped back and he's like, did you see that? And I actually was watching the screen because I thought that was pretty cool technology. I was, maybe 13 at the time. It's pretty neat. You could, see some digitized image of what was below you. And I kid you not, the water that we were in was probably no more than 6 foot. But there was a wake when that thing moved off in that direction that you could see. We never saw anything more than that. Nothing ever happened. I could only envision that was maybe one of those giant catfish that you hear so much about. And we just spooked it when we, used the little trolling motor and went over top of it. But it gave me a new respect. And I was a little leery to go swimming the next day, to say the least. But I guess that's the coolest story I would have, the scariest story.
I got a couple, 2 of them from the Lake of the Ozarks. One, and this is just, a matter of perspective and being a kid and all. My uncle had hooked what was probably a 4-foot catfish, rod and reel.
Nice size fish.
It's a big fish. The biggest fish he'd ever caught on rod and reel at that point in time. I don't know that he ever broke that particular personal record, but I remember they didn't clean it right away. He ran a stringer, like a big heavy-duty stringer through its gills, and then he staked it from the shore, like big heavy rock, and drove it into the ground.
Right. And
we were camping, so, we would go swimming in the lake routinely. And all I can remember is this giant fish in this place where I'm supposed to go swimming. And I didn't want to get anywhere near because catfish are gnarly-looking creatures, And I didn't know much about catfish and all that, but I'd seen my dad get stuck with a barb more than once.
Oh, yeah, they can hurt you.
So I knew that they could draw blood, and so I didn't want anything to do with it. Number 2 is a story that my dad used to tell me, and he would routinely take us below the dam to go fishing. And, below the dam has its fair share of stories. You got the big cats that sit there and all the stuff that comes through.
Gets all chunky fish chunks coming through the dam, and they just sit there with their mouths open and collect it.
But he had a story of being out there in a boat and going up as close as you could get and trying to fish at the base of the dam. Mm-hmm. And he hooked something. And to this day, he says he doesn't know what it was. But whatever it was, when he hooked it, decided it was going to go downstream. And it didn't care that there was a boat and a guy at the other end of the line. It just took him downstream with it for a good way before the line finally broke.
Oh.
So whatever he hooked into was pretty good size. And then the last one, we were on vacation in Tennessee, and my brother-in-law had rented a pontoon boat, and this is scary for a different reason. My son was going to go swimming. He had a life vest on, and he went to jump off the side of the boat, but didn't quite clear the pontoon and smacked his head.
Ooh.
And it knocked him kind of senseless for a moment or two, which was really scary because he's in the water.
Yeah.
And he kind of plunks down underneath and then pops back up, and just we couldn't, he wasn't responsive at first. And that was really pretty scary. And then, of course, later on, I jumped in the water with him and we were kind of swimming around. Well, I guess it was a really windy day and we didn't pay much attention. And we ended up getting pushed significantly further away from the boat than we had intended.
Just wind drifting you.
And I'm a pretty strong swimmer on my own, but I didn't have enough strength to pull him back to the boat with me.
Oh,
and
goodness.
So they had to bring the boat over to get us. And it was kind of, for a moment there, it was kind of nerve-wracking. I mean, not that I didn't think anybody was leaving me at the lake, but for a moment there, it was just kind of like, ugh.
Well, there's some deep areas of that lake too. So, yeah, you get off in the wrong spots. Well, we hope that you've enjoyed yet another installment of what you'll find here on Nightmares on the Lost Highway. We very much appreciate each and every one of you. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, like, share, let people know if there's a story in particular that you're interested in. Feel free to leave us in the comments. We'll consider doing it for a possible episode, or maybe even just share what you've learned or what you might have enjoyed from tonight's. Thanks again.
Hey, real quick, call to action. I think Eric would agree. We'd like to grow this Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
Absolutely.
If you could, if you're listening on Apple, if you would go and give us a review and rate us. If you have some feedback, that's fine too. Whatever platform you're listening, follow us, rate us, give us some reviews. That helps get some recognition and gets our name out there.
We do have a Facebook page, Nightmares on the Lost Highway. You can easily find us if you want to communicate with us, if you want to share some possibilities for future podcasts with us. Reach out. We want to talk with you guys.
Now, according to the Bureau, that's a weird name, and I keep going. According to the Bureau, I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.